Golden Iris Productions presents Missionary Family Adventures Beneath the Volcano from the book by Mark F. Dennis. Introduction. This is the story of an American missionary family and their remarkable journey to Japan. It is a story of faith, family, adventure, and growing up between two cultures. It is the story of how an ordinary family from America found themselves living beneath one of the most active volcanoes in the world. The events you are about to hear are not fiction. They are real memories from a childhood spent in the mountains of Japan. They are stories of ocean voyages, mountain trails, train rides, cultural discoveries, and the experiences that shaped an entire family. To understand how we came to live in such an extraordinary place, we begin not in America, but beneath the shadow of a volcano in the Japanese Alps. Historical disclaimer. This series faithfully presents the writings and memories of missionary Dick Dennis. His observations about religion, culture, and society reflect his sincerely held evangelical Christian beliefs during the 1960s. They are presented in their historical context to preserve the authenticity of his family's story and are not intended as commentary on the beliefs of others today. Part 27. Time to Return. Leaving Pennsylvania. By the middle of the summer of 1975, it was finally time for the Dennis family to return to Japan. Dad and four of us, Kathy, Mark, Nathan, and little Danny, would make the long drive west to Los Angeles. Mom, along with Tim and Debbie, would fly later from New York to meet us in California. After a send-off prayer meeting at Limerick Chapel, we drove to our grandparents' house, where we stayed for a couple of days. Then, with Mom, Tim, and Debbie remaining behind with our grandparents, we packed the station wagon one last time and set off across America on another unforgettable journey. First stop, Lake Erie. Our first overnight stop was at a KOA campground near Lake Erie in Ohio. Mark couldn't wait to go fishing. Every lake and river along the trip looked like another adventure waiting to happen. But as Mark walked toward the shoreline with his fishing pole, Mark was met by the awful smell of decay. Dead fish covered the beach, baking in the summer sun. Pollution had become so severe that much of the lake's fish population had died. It was a heartbreaking sight. The following day, we crossed into Michigan and camped beside Lake Michigan. Nearby was a large power plant that discharged warm water into the lake, attracting fish from all around. Mark eagerly cast his line into the warm current and soon hooked the biggest fish Mark had ever caught, a 2-foot-long channel catfish. Cleaning it with Dad's small pocket knife wasn't easy, but that evening everyone enjoyed fresh fish cooked over the campfire. Wisconsin mosquitoes. From Michigan, we drove through Chicago and into Wisconsin, where we spent another night at a campground. Unfortunately, the mosquitoes were everywhere. They swarmed around the campsite and even found their way inside our tent. Instead of sitting around a campfire telling stories, everyone crawled into sleeping bags early, hoping to escape the relentless buzzing. Sleep came slowly that night. Early the next morning, we continued west through Minnesota and across the endless plains of South Dakota and the Badlands. The miles seemed to stretch forever, with fields, ranches, and wide-open skies in every direction. It felt like we were crossing an entirely different America than the wooded hills back home. Every hour brought new scenery and another step closer to the Rocky Mountains. Wall Drug. One of our favorite stops was the famous Wall Drug in Wall, South Dakota. Outside in the dinosaur park stood an enormous Tyrannosaurus Rex statue that fascinated every child who visited. Inside, it seemed you could buy almost anything imaginable. One of the strangest souvenirs was a stuffed jackalope, a mythical creature that looked like a jackrabbit with antelope horns. It was one of those unforgettable roadside attractions that made family road trips so much fun. Leaving Wall, we drove through the rugged beauty of the Badlands before arriving at Mount Rushmore. Seeing the giant stone faces of 4 American presidents carved into the mountainside was truly impressive. After spending a couple of hours exploring the monument, we continued west toward Wyoming and the towering volcanic rock formation known as Devil's Tower. That evening, we camped near Devil's Tower in the cool Black Hills of Wyoming. Long before it became famous in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the massive rock rising high above the plains inspired awe all by itself. While the rest of the family settled into camp, Mark went searching nearby for a trout stream, hoping once again to catch dinner before darkness fell. Yellowstone National Park. The next day, we reached Yellowstone National Park. Watching Old Faithful erupt and standing beside the magnificent Yellowstone Falls made the long drive worthwhile. Everywhere we looked were steaming geysers, rushing rivers, and breathtaking mountain scenery unlike anything we had ever seen. Of course, Mark couldn't leave Yellowstone without trying to catch a trout. Every clear mountain stream looked perfect for fishing. Dad, however, knew we still had many miles ahead of us and gently reminded me that California was still a long way away. After a few casts, Mark packed up his fishing gear, climbed back into the station wagon, and we continued west. That evening, they stopped at a small country grocery store and set up camp near Butte, Montana. After devouring hot dogs and enjoying s'mores made with graham crackers, melted marshmallows, and chocolate bars, they pitched their tents and soon drifted off to sleep beneath the Montana sky.
Part 28.
Toward Elk City. The next morning, Dad pointed the station wagon toward Elk City, Idaho. This place held special memories because years earlier he and Mom had spent part of their honeymoon on Elk Summit while working at a forest lookout tower. Dad wanted all of us to see the place where those early years of their married life had begun. The rough mountain road climbed steadily higher as the car bounced over rocks and ruts. More than once, the station wagon scraped the ground. Finally, we reached the summit. Amazingly, the lookout tower and small house looked almost exactly as Dad remembered them. Curious, Mark climbed the tall tower. Looking down from high above the forest was both exciting and terrifying, but the door at the top was locked, so Mark climbed carefully back down. Just as we were preparing to leave, Mark heard a faint trickling sound beneath the car and smelled gasoline. Crawling underneath, Mark discovered that the gas tank had been punctured on the rocky road. Fuel was steadily pouring onto the ground. Stranded on a remote mountain would have been a serious problem. Thinking quickly, Mark jammed a small stick into the hole and sealed around it with chewing gum. It wasn't a permanent repair, but it slowed the leak enough to get us safely back to town. A local mechanic in Elk City repaired the tank with epoxy, and soon we were on our way once again.
Yosemite National Park. Our route carried us across Idaho, eastern Washington, Oregon, Nevada, and finally into California by way of beautiful Lake Tahoe. From there, we entered Yosemite National Park and camped beneath the towering granite cliffs. From our campsite, we could look up at El Capitan, its sheer rock face rising thousands of feet above the valley floor. It was one of the most spectacular campgrounds we had ever visited. The next morning, we explored Bridal Veil Fall and hiked several nearby trails before continuing on to see California's magnificent giant sequoias. Standing beside General Sherman, one of the largest living trees on Earth, made us feel incredibly small. Some of these ancient giants had been growing for nearly 2,000 years. We even drove through tunnels carved into massive fallen trees, something none of us would ever forget. Reunion in California. Late that evening, we finally arrived in Huntington Beach. Waiting there were Mom, Tim, and Debbie, who had flown from New York several days earlier. After thousands of miles on the road, our family was together again. It was a joyful reunion and a welcome chance to rest before boarding our flight back across the Pacific to begin another chapter of life in Japan. On August 23, 1975, with the help of a missionary friend in Los Angeles that they hadn't seen in years, the Dennis family was able to get all 300 pounds of baggage to the airport and checked in on time. Although they were probably the last ones to board the DC-10 to Japan, they were quite comfortably seated in the rear of the plane, where they had a little more room to move around for the 14-hour flight.
They arrived in Tokyo about midnight Los Angeles time, 4 p.m. Tokyo, and with some difficulty because of terribly crowded conditions in Haneda Airport, finally cleared customs and immigration. They were met by friends who took most of their baggage to Karuizawa for them, while they went on to Team Center in Tokyo to get some sleep. The next day, they went up to their home in Karuizawa by train, finally recovering from the jet lag and settling in over a couple of days. Now it was time again to be busy unpacking their boxes and furniture that they had stored before going to the States.
To be continued. Memoirs of a Missionary, Bringing True Light to the Land of the Rising Sun, tells the story of my father, Dick Dennis, and his decades of missionary service in Japan. Drawing from his journals, prayer letters, and personal memories, the book records the challenges, victories, and everyday experiences of sharing the gospel while living among the Japanese people. Many of the events presented throughout this series are drawn from these first-hand accounts. If you would like to explore the story in greater detail, simply scan the QR code or visit the book on Amazon.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this presentation, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video with others. For more content, visit my 2 YouTube channels. Mark F. Dennis at Golden Iris Knowledge Quest, where we explore physics, cosmology, science, and emerging ideas about the structure of the universe. And Mark F. Dennis at Golden Iris Religion Quest, where we examine religion, spirituality, biblical studies, Jewish mysticism, and the history of religious thought. Your support helps these channels continue to grow and allows me to create more presentations, books, and educational content. Thank you again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.